Happy Friday, and welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy developments shaping the crypto world every Friday afternoon. It's a very special Friday because
It is.
Happy
birthday.
birthday!
Yeah, we didn't coordinate that, unfortunately, but happy birthday, Gerald.
Thank you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. It's a good one.
Oh my gosh, we get sound effects too.
I love it. I got a markup for my birthday, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
You got a markup with bipartisan support, Gerald.
Bipartisan. I'm fine with us calling it bipartisan support. I think that's.
Was that on your birthday list? Is that what you asked for?
Absolutely. Yeah. I blew out the candles yesterday, and I was like, I need 2 Dems, and they
I need
delivered.
2 Dems for my birthday. Yeah, and you got them. There we go.
Yeah.
2 Dems you got. What are your weekend plans, Gerald? You going away anywhere special?
So I actually, all right, this is like a bit ridiculous. So I watched a bowling documentary on HBO. And I used to be I used to like bowling in like high school. So we're going bowling tonight. And like that's pretty much it.
I love bowling, and I love that for you, Gerald. Make sure it's all in the form. Like keep your arms straight. Okay?
Yeah. No, I got to get the technique down. Yeah. It's
Is it one of those like fancy bowling alleys? I feel like they have these like really upscale ones now where there's like bars and there's like
sometimes bands.
Yeah. I feel like our DC audience will get this. So we're doing Punch Bowl. Pinstripes was all sold out. So we're doing Punch Bowl Social. And it's exactly that. It's like the barcade thing, like go hang out. So
if you want to go wish Gerald a happy birthday, you know where to find him.
Don't find me.
Don't find me. I will not be found tonight.
You just ruined his birthday plans.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Anyway, well, coming up for you guys today, we have a big Friday show. We've got some excellent guests to break down this big week in the cryptocurrency space. We have Coinbase's Chief Legal Officer, Paul Grewal. We have Veda, she's the General Counsel at Veda Labs, and Cody Carbone, the CEO at the Digital Chamber. We're going to get into the Clarity markup, the big surprise with the bipartisan support from 2 Democrats, Senators Angela Alsobrooks from Maryland and Ruben Gallego from Arizona. All the fun headlines of the week as well, which we'll of course get into as we always do, starting right now with Federal Reserve Chairman, I guess we can call him now, Kevin Warsh, was confirmed this week by the full Senate. And it is officially Jerome Powell's last day as Federal Reserve Chairman today. So he will be moving on swiftly, but he will actually be staying on the board. So I don't know if that's going to be awkward, but he plans to stay on until some of those lingering pieces of the DOJ investigation officially wrap up, is what I understand. But
Gerald, was this also on your birthday list?
You know what? I mean, I think we'll take it. Yeah,
we'll take it. Yeah. I know we had Chris Waller on the podcast too, and he was one of the candidates up for the position. So, I mean, I think it's good news now.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because Kevin Warsh historically, I think we've talked about this on the show before too. Like he historically was pretty conservative. He's obviously disclosed like a big portfolio of crypto holdings, so we like that. He's also entering like a really challenging rate environment. So, today, like I think the 5-year just hit a high, and then Japan actually I think also just hit 4% for the first time since like '99. So we are entering like a lot of geopolitical uncertainty. It's not like easy free money time. So. Yeah, we'll see. Like it's obviously good for our industry and for the like the broader sort of crypto agenda, but it's like not an easy job. Like I would not want that job. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Just go on CNBC this week and say if you're under 40, Bitcoin is your new gold. So you can imagine how crypto Twitter was reacting to that one.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We're stuck around 80K,
Right. I'm not sure the price of Bitcoin
about it.
Too favorably to it, but
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. But definitely the dawning of a new era at the Fed, and then on top of that, with Fed Governor Waller, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, he's bringing in the new era of the payments accounts over there where
Right.
crypto companies will get more of a look in when it comes to access to the Fed, potentially with these new skinny master accounts, which we get into with him and with the interview.
Yes.
Yeah, so lots of changes over there, potentially more to come. We'll see. Circle as well. Circle's getting into quite a few changes itself. It's becoming less of a stablecoin company these days, I'd say, and becoming more of a, I guess, a financial infrastructure company. Actually,
Operating system business, I
Yeah.
believe, is what Jeremy Allaire said, their CEO. But yes, to
okay,
your point, Eleanor, yeah.
is that it? Yeah, I had someone from Circle on my panel in Bermuda this week, and I said, "What do you call Circle these days?" Like, I would think of it as a stablecoin company, or that's what you guys pitched the idea as. And he's like, "No, no, no, we're a financial infrastructure platform now." I'm like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
big news for them.
interesting. I think the way he put it was like this multi-stakeholder distributed model is the exact words that I read this morning in preparation for our live stream. But it's kind of interesting because, they are a public company. So that means they have the equity portion of this. And then there is the ARC token.
So ARC is
And
their
this
layer
is something
one
that like
blockchain.
Coinbase has not done. I heard there are rumors, of the base token coming, but like they have not actively, gone down this route the way that Circle is essentially going now. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to kind of see how this like pans out and like whether ARC then diverges away from Circle, given kind of what's the legality here, Gerald?
Yeah, I haven't dug into like the governance model. I mean, it's like TradFi L1s and like that, shout out to whatever McKinsey or Bain or BCG consultant wrote that financial operating model piece. Because it's very TradFi corporate speak. The this to me this competes with like a Canton or like like a layer zero kind of getting into this like financial OS space. Like I yeah, I don't know. I would imagine, or like a Hedera, right? Like Hedera is all kind of like corporate
Yeah, they have a
validators.
bunch of different ones.
Yeah, it's and
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't know what the governance architecture is, but I imagine they'll have to kind of spin it out at some point.
I mean, Circle shares rose on Monday following the funding news, so it seems investors were happy about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and also I know like with Clarity moving ahead, like we'll talk a lot more about this, but expanding into like other revenue opportunities that are not just passive yield is obviously like kind of inevitable for everyone whose business model relied on that. So
Mhm.
yeah, we'll see what they end up doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the funding, for those who didn't see the announcement, was from BlackRock, Apollo, and Andreessen Horowitz. They came in with 222 million in a
Mhm.
pre-sale round for their ARC token, and it was at a $3 billion valuation. So,
Yeah. And A16Z also led it too. So it's interesting
mhm.
to see the continued investment from these traditional firms, as well as like obviously A16Z. They just announced a new fund too recently, I
Yep.
believe. Yeah. So it's just like very indicative of the times, as they call it, the convergence of maybe these traditional investment firms and then traditional institutional players kind of like all banking on this. Also,
Yeah.
Eleanor, I want to ask, how was Bermuda?
Yeah.
It
You
was good.
you slid that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you guys were missed. Everybody was asking where
Yeah.
my 2 fabulous co-hosts were, but it was good. The weather was terrible, though. I mean, I was expecting sun and island weather, but no, it was, well, these are island weather, right? It was island weather in terms of very rainy and cold and thunderstormy.
That is not
Yeah,
what I imagine when I think of
Yeah.
Bermuda.
yeah, island weather, thinking about, like, England, right? England's an
Yeah, yeah,
island,
yeah.
pretty much the same.
That's a different island, yeah.
It's a different island, but had the same vibes, unfortunately. But yeah, the content was great. Saw a couple friends of the show over there, and Charles Hoskinson, he wants to come on the show, so we extended
Love
him
that.
an invitation potentially for next week. So we'll see where we
Okay.
land on that. But
For the
yeah,
Cardano
yeah,
fans, yeah.
Cardano fans, Midnight fans.
Midnight, yes, the privacy one.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Cool.
Lots of talk about the Clarity Act, of course. That was sort of the main focus, as well as, well, there was some announcements too. Stellar partnered with Bermuda to kind of
Yeah, I
bring
saw
some
that.
of their economy on chain, right? They want to become the first economy to really move a lot of their infrastructure on chain, and Stellar is helping them do that. So that was a big announcement that came out of the conference. A couple of other announcements too, but yeah, all in all, a good one. We should all try and go, the three of us, next year.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Well,
Jackson Hole.
we'll see them we'll see them in Wyoming, right?
That's true. Yeah. And then another headline that caught my eye today was Gemini. Stock jumped 25%. It was on an announcement of a strategic investment from the Winklevoss twins themselves, their Winklevoss Capital Fund.
A modest $100 million.
Yeah. They can afford it. But it happened as the company is looking to expand beyond crypto trading and reposition itself as a prediction markets company, and also kind of getting into broader markets as well. It also came on the back of better than expected quarterly earnings, which is good for them because their earnings results in the past have not been up to snuff, if I remember correctly. So a good day for Gemini, definitely a good day for Gemini investors. Their stock, I remember when it debuted on the NASDAQ, they went public on the NASDAQ. They had a pretty good IPO. The stock was really good on day one, I think the first week. And then lately it's gone down to, I think below like $4. So that 25% bump has been probably welcome for some of those Gemini investors who have lost out in the past couple months.
Yeah. Also, I know we just pulled up the stock and I was looking at the CNBC article too. Gemini Space Station is the actual official name for this. You learn something new every day. And they were a sponsor of the podcast. Yeah. Full disclaimer. But we did not, or at least I did not know that they were Gemini Space Station. I always just knew it as Gemini. Why not?
Yeah.
Space Station. Oh, that $5.89 right now, up 12%. So it's come down a little from its high, but
and I think I was just going to say, I think this comes on the back of, like we've talked about, there's like all of these exchanges are really, really competing as like we get like regulatory clarity, as we get more licenses in the space. Like obviously prediction markets have been a huge component of like regulated exchanges. So it'll be interesting to see like what Gemini does with the new capital and like the business model. Like I think we also were talking about before the show, like their card revenue was pretty strong. There's like a lot of these exchanges that are expanding into other areas. So it could be short-term bump, could be like really good for the business model.
Yeah, Tyler Winklevoss, the CEO of Gemini, said in a statement that essentially they're going to evolve from a crypto company into a markets company, kind of going back to the point you were talking about before, Eleanor. And so whatever markets means in that context, maybe it's a prediction market company, or it's like markets in the sense of like what Robinhood did, kind of a mix of things. It's definitely, I think, a sign of the times too, where a lot of this like on-chain financial infrastructure platforms, et cetera, are just becoming like finance, like they kind of want to move away from this like separation of church and state, where like church is traditional finance, state is crypto. Maybe that's a stretch with the saying, but like that's kind of how I'm interpreting it, is that like I think even with like Coinbase, maybe we could ask Paul about this too, is like, do you ultimately see it as just like a financial app and not like a crypto one, right? And maybe that's not Coinbase's objective, but like I've definitely seen that and heard that from a lot of these different firms. Like when we had eToro on too, eToro US, Andrew, he essentially said like their goal was to become kind of like a big financial app for everyone across the board.
Yeah. And if you look at something like what Kraken 360 is doing, I know that was a big focus at Consensus, like all the other avenues that they're now getting into with their M&A, like they are just sort of the everything exchange is kind of here. Maybe this is the super apps, that we've been talking about. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, I believe our first guest is backstage. So joining us to talk about how DeFi world is reacting to the passing of the Clarity Act is General Counsel at Veda Labs, V. Lee. Veda Labs is a DeFi infrastructure company that builds vault technology designed to make crypto yields products more easy for apps, exchanges, institutions to offer to their users. I believe they partnered with Kraken recently. So yeah, V, welcome on.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Happy
also
Friday.
A fellow podcaster, host of the
Yes.
Dex in the City show, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. So maybe to start off, the bill gets deep into the weeds on DeFi infrastructure, even referencing crypto vaults directly. So how would you kind of grade Congress in terms of its understanding of how DeFi works and maybe on the vault front?
Yeah. So, what I found so remarkable between this draft and just the draft from like 5 months ago is I feel like there really is a growing recognition of crypto as infrastructure. And to me, that represents actually like a really huge conceptual shift, right? So, what I mean by that is like, I think it's very useful to sort of zoom out for a second and really appreciate what I think is happening here, right? Like at its core, of course, the Clarity Act is trying to answer really basic questions that the industry has been struggling with for years. Like, what is a security? What's a commodity? How should these assets be issued and traded, et cetera? But to me, the bill is actually much bigger than that, right? I think it's really an attempt to modernize the markets and regulation using new technology that can better achieve investor protection and market integrity and other important regulatory goals better than traditional intermediary-based systems, right? So if you look at the bill as a whole, one running theme that you see in this version is the growing recognition of the like architectural characteristics of blockchain, right? Like I was saying, like of crypto as actual infrastructure. So you see rules like, or words like transparent and rules-based and programmatic and objective and verifiable, right? And to me, that is Congress's way of saying we need to take these technological features into account in the regulation. So honestly, I don't even think of this as a crypto bill. I think of it as a market modernization bill. Like this is the legislation that is going to bring our financial markets into the 21st century. And to me, that's what makes it really exciting and historic. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention vaults. We were very excited. Our whole team was really excited to see the mention of, not just vaults, but vault tokens and digital asset receipts and transparent systems and constrained programmatic infrastructure, right? Like you see these terms in the bill. And like I said, I think that is a really meaning conceptual shift. Like I think Congress really is beginning to understand and think of crypto as infrastructure. So that was really exciting.
Sounds like you'd give the bill an A, B.
Well, I mean, so I think it's a huge improvement from January. I think there are things that can be cleaned up or clarified for sure. But I just we were also encouraged to see just how much Congress has, how much progress they've made in their understanding of like this technology. So that was really exciting.
Yeah. Something that we saw come in, I think around the 11th hour yesterday was some of these negotiations around the BRCA, and it was introduced in order to drum up more democratic support for the markup. And I think there's some concern, especially in the DeFi community, around that this could be sort of the beginning of maybe some broader efforts to water down some of those protections for non-custodial software developers. This has been a big theme we've seen all along, through negotiations for clarity in the last couple of months. I mean, is this something that you guys are watching, something that you're concerned about as we move forward in the next couple of weeks?
Sure. I mean, I think everyone in DeFi is impacted by things like the Blockchain Regulatory Clarity Act, right? I thought it was unfortunate that the cross-reference was removed from the DeFi section. I mean, I think it's still like really good to see that it's in the section on money transmission, and that they added the specific intent language, right? Because I think that it is important to have a limiting principle there where there is a distinction made between, a developer knowing that someone could use the software for unlawful activity versus them specifically intending to facilitate that unlawful activity, right? That's what the specific intent language attempts to do. And I think that's really important. So, I mean, obviously we're all glad to see that in there. But I think, all of that stuff is obviously very important to anyone who's building in DeFi. I was really encouraged to see, like I said earlier, that, I think one of the most interesting things in this latest draft is that it really recognizes the kinds of systems, like the exact kinds of systems that a company like Veda builds, right? So, historically, financial regulation has assumed that things like investor protection had to come from centralized intermediaries that are exercising a lot of active discretion, right? Parties like brokers and custodians and transfer agents and fund managers and things like that. Vaults are an example of a technology that, or infrastructure that sort of inverts that assumption, because a lot of those kinds of protections can actually be embedded architecturally, right, into the system itself, right? So with vaults, assets remain non-custodial, rules are transparent, permissions are constrained by code, allocations and deployments and investments can be programmatic. Users and regulators can see everything happening in real time, right? And users retain direct ownership and continuous withdrawal rights, right? So these are the kinds of things I think that map very closely to the direction that the Clarity draft is moving conceptually. And then, for us specifically at Veda, clearer market structure rules like this will, I think, dramatically accelerate not just institutional comfort with on-chain vault infrastructure and other sorts of DeFi. I think it'll also accelerate like retail adoption, right? It's so funny because we use the term like TradFi or institutions. I think a lot of time in crypto, we use it so pejoratively, but ultimately what institutions and TradFi means is that more retail users, right? Because they're ultimately the end users of these institutions and of TradFi, right? What it ultimately means is that more retail is going to get to benefit from things like DeFi. So I don't think we should look at it as like, TradFi versus crypto. To me, more institutional adoption just actually means more people are going to get to access this technology. So to me, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
and the Clarity Act, I think, goes a long way towards promoting that and fostering it. So
I want to ask you about one of the things that has been a big sort of subject over the last couple of weeks of this being like a preemptive financial reform, right? Like obviously crypto has gone through our own versions of crises kind of over the years, but this is one of the first major financial reforms. Like even you talk about Dodd-Frank being reactive to like the financial crisis. The Securities Exchange Act itself is a product of like the crash in 29. And so there's this preemptive like ask from the industry to be regulated. But I actually just saw my first Investors for Transparency ad yesterday. I don't know if you guys have seen these, but basically saying that we want to be unregulated and all this kind of stuff. Like, how important do you think the educational piece on getting Congress across the finish line here is in like the notion that we're asking to be regulated? Like, this is not a, you mentioned words like transparency and permissions, things like that.
Yeah.
How do you think about this being preemptive, and then also like any of these kind of like negative notions that this is somehow giving sort of broader leadway to like financial crimes and things like that? It seems like a major misperception.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right? Like if you look at financial legislation historically, it usually is very reactive to some sort of crisis, right? So in the 1970s, when the federal securities laws were amended, that was in reaction to the paperwork crisis. And so basically Congress had to come up with a whole new system of clearing and settlement to keep up with the growing stock market. And then, of course, Dodd-Frank was, in response to the financial crisis. Here, I actually think it's a little bit different. I think what happened here is that this new asset class and this new technology came along, and it wasn't born out of like a specific incident, right? It was something that was invented and was transformative, and the rules just didn't fit, right? And obviously we have had some crises, right? Like FTX and things like that. But I don't actually think that is the main like driver for this. I think it's because this technology really does represent something so new and so different that we have to come up with new laws for it. Like we've seen over the last few years, the existing laws just don't work, right? Like if you applied the existing securities laws, commodities laws, it would literally just kill the technology. It would kill this asset class and it would kill this industry. So it's not going to work. And I think by now we've all recognized that there are a lot of benefits to the markets and to society if we can responsibly innovate, right? So I think this actually is a very rare and interesting case where regulation isn't coming to respond to some blow up. It's actually coming because we recognize that there's this revolutionary technology that we want to benefit from. And we can't do that responsibly unless we have new rules.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned in the intro, V, that Veda provides vault infrastructure for a lot of teams like Kraken, for example. So how should our audience be thinking about vaults on the state side, or maybe even from a global perspective, right? And then like, what should they know going forward in regards to like what's actually on the table here on the regulatory front?
Totally. So vaults are the coolest. You know, and at I know, like,
you're not biased, no.
No, not at all.
Vaults are like a hot topic now, though. Yes.
Yeah. But like, you know, at Veda, we actually think that DeFi cannot succeed without vaults. And I know that's like maybe that's like a very provocative statement.
Explain it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I think one thing that people misunderstand is this idea that, you know, mainstream DeFi adoption means millions of people like directly managing on-chain strategies themselves, right? Routing transactions and monitoring collateral and, you know, doing things to optimize yield and evaluating governance proposals. And I think that's just, you know, realistically, that's not how most people interact with financial systems today. You know, I don't know about you, but that's like not how I'm trying to spend my Tuesday nights, right? Yeah. So, you know, the analogy I always make is most people don't build stock portfolios from scratch or do diligence on every asset they own or actively monitor the risk in their portfolios every day, right? So if you look at the statistics, over 90% of retail investors actually get exposure to the stock market through managed vehicles like an ETF or a mutual fund or a 401k, right? Things that are professionally designed and managed and are just simple and convenient for like everyday users. So I think DeFi will evolve in the same way, right? Right now, the biggest barrier to mainstream adoption of DeFi isn't that the underlying technology doesn't work, right? It actually works like beautifully. You know, obviously we really need to get buttoned up on the security front. And I think we are, you know, making strides in that area. But, you know, I think the main barrier to adoption now is that interacting with DeFi is actually still really intimidating for most people and for institutions. And I think that's why infrastructure like vaults is going to become really important, right? So vaults are non-custodial smart contracts that programmatically deploy assets into DeFi strategies according to preset transparent rules and constraints. And what this does is it allows users and institutions to access things like on-chain lending and staking and liquidity provisioning and other kinds of on-chain activities without needing to personally monitor and manage like every moving piece themselves throughout the day. And then the other really important thing about vaults is they do all of that, but they still, you know, allow the underlying protocols themselves to stay open and permissionless. And I think that distinction really matters, like to me, from an ideological, but also from a policy perspective, right? Vaults don't impose regulation at the blockchain or the protocol layer. Anyone can still interact directly with the DeFi protocols if they want to. Vaults just give you an option, you know, users and institutions an option if they want more simplicity or predictability, or if they have like compliance or risk controls that they need to abide by, right? So I think that's the reason vaults have just really proliferated this past year and have become, I think, a really powerful bridge between TradFi and DeFi. And I think ultimately, if DeFi succeeds in gaining mass adoption, it won't be because the average person has learned to like manage all the risks of DeFi, right? DeFi is going to scale because the infrastructure like vaults matures in a way that makes access simple and convenient and safe for the everyday person, while still preserving the open and permissionless nature of DeFi. So that's the vision, and I think that's why we're really excited about, you know, what we're building in Veda.
I wanted to ask you about that. I think you just alluded to a lot of the architecture vaults that is sort of new or creates like better UX for folks, but we've seen a huge shift in DeFi away from like traditional liquidity pools. And we've seen like in traditional sort of LP environments, there's a lot of like MNPI potentially. There's like, you know, folks like operating on, assumptions that maybe there's like a market maker in the pool, or like that yield is like coming from somewhere. What are the biggest differences between like traditional LP, like liquidity pools and vaults? Like, why do you think that has become such a big shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important to understand about vaults is that the yield that users are getting is actually coming from real economic activity, right? You're lending your assets or you're borrowing assets. So it's like, it's the same thing that happens in traditional finance. Vaults do a lot of different things. And honestly, I think what's really powerful about them is that they can serve as a gateway to all sorts of on-chain finance in the future. But right now, primarily what they do is they give users access to on-chain lending strategies, right, in an open and permissionless way. So that is real economic activity. It's no different than, if you are doing lending through a traditional intermediary like a bank. It's just you're doing it on open permissionless rails. So I think that's where it's important for users to understand that is where the yield is coming from. I do think, and this is something that we think about a lot at Veda, and I know a lot of the vault space is working on these efforts. I do think transparency is really important. Not just that users understand where the yield is coming from and what's happening to their assets. I think it's also really important for them to understand the risks involved, right? I mean, DeFi has inherent risks. And I think, because vaults have become so popular, people are sort of just chasing the APY, which is not necessarily a good thing. I think it creates misaligned incentives with curators and other actors in the space. And so, this vaults are still very early. This space is maturing, but I do think as, more institutions adopt these products and offer them to their users, that we will start to see more standards around transparency and disclosures and reporting and that sort of thing.
Vee, thank you so much for your insight. It was really interesting.
Thanks for having me.
See you again soon. Thanks, Vee.
Bye.
Well, Paul Grewal is Coinbase's chief legal officer. He has been front and center through every twist and every turn of this roller coaster ride that's been getting the Clarity Act through the Senate Banking Committee and several steps before that as well. He joins us now to break down the markup yesterday and what comes next. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's great to see you all.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Paul. So I saw a tweet yesterday from Katie Hahn over at Hahn Ventures that I loved, and it was you and Katie and Brian Armstrong, and I think it was Ron Conway on a plane 5 years ago doing work for, market structure before Clarity Act was even the Clarity Act. So I just wanted to pull that up because I just kind of speaks to how long you personally have been working on this venture, and which kind of came to a head yesterday when we saw the bill go through the committee with bipartisan support. So I just kind of want to get your reaction to everything that's happened and then what happened yesterday. How do you feel right now?
Well, as for this picture, I wish I had remembered to pack a razor. I did not. We were flying all over the place, trying to get anyone to pay attention to crypto legislation that we had in our heads. And yesterday was just a watershed moment, I think, for not just the four of us in that picture, but for the entire crypto industry. So many people have been working so long and so hard to get sensible rules for crypto in place. And while we're not done yet, there's still a lot of important work that lies ahead, and nothing can be taken for granted. It was in many ways a sense of vindication yesterday to see Democrats and Republicans alike agree that time for crypto legislation is finally here.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, banks are still lobbying pretty hard against the stablecoin yield deal, maybe, for lack of better words. Are you still worried that they could kind of gain more traction on the Senate floor here, or kind of what's the game plan on your side?
Well, my job is to worry. So yes, the short answer.
Look,
for good reason. Look, the banks are formidable. And I think everyone in crypto and frankly, outside of crypto should never forget that. But what we saw yesterday was a fundamental repudiation of the core argument they have made against this legislation, particularly as it applies to rewards. I was locked in, not quite locked in, but maybe stuck in room after room, meeting after meeting, at the White House on the Hill going back several months with many of their best lobbyists. And over again, they kept making the argument that somehow if we allowed rewards to exist in any form, that community banks would be decimated, that there'd be massive deposit flight, and that the financial system as a whole would come crashing down. There's never been any evidence of that. And I think that their attempts to claim otherwise were rejected pretty soundly in the bipartisan vote that we saw.
Yeah, Paul, on that note, like when, I think Patrick Witt has been on the show before talking about, if you get nothing done here, like you're stuck with genius. It's settled law, it's passed. And so that's either the framework you're working in, or you just keep coming back to the table kind of indefinitely. Like at what point does this argument sort of finish, right? Because obviously if the legislation passes, but it just seems like there's this constant need to come back to the table and relitigate things that we already thought were sort of agreed on. So like, how do you think about the finish line here on that piece as well? And then obviously we have so many other important issues to work through to get this bill done.
Well, I think it finishes for all practical purposes when the banks finally take yes for an answer, because the reality is that in the language that was voted on and approved yesterday, we saw that the banks got significant restrictions on rewards that do not exist under the current law. You're absolutely right. Genius is the law of the land. And under Genius, rewards restrictions on intermediaries simply don't exist. Intermediaries are free to pay rewards for whatever activity or lack of activity they want. Under the language that went through markup yesterday, now we're going to see rewards tied specifically to activity. And rule writing is going to have to flesh out a lot of the detail underlying this. And so in some sense, it's never over because rules can always be written and rewritten and rewritten. But I think that what you saw, again, with the bipartisan consensus was the Senate Banking Committee saying enough is enough. There are many other important issues in this legislation that matter, and a couple of issues at least that remain outstanding. And so let's get on with the rest of the work and not allow the bank's obsession with this one particular use case with respect to rewards overwhelm important other work that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the work that still needs to be done, Paul. What's next for Coinbase, for you guys, in terms of what you're watching, what you're hoping to achieve in the next couple of weeks as we head towards a vote? And obviously the bills need to come together, right? We've got the Senate banking text, we've got the Senate ag text. They need to merge. But in terms of what action you guys are looking to take, I mean, how can we expect to see what's going to play out in the next couple of weeks in terms of that?
Well, we do need still to get to 60 votes to
right.
To overcome the potential of a filibuster. And to do that, we do need first to reconcile the language from yesterday that was marked up with the markup that came out of the Senate Ag Committee. And then, of course, there's the floor vote. And, at each step of that process, you can expect lots of intense debate, not only on the issues that remain outstanding, particularly around protecting developers and ethics, but also on issues that we believe have already been settled. Our adversaries are not going to give up. They're going to keep at this until the very last moment. However, I do think that we saw some very encouraging signs. I've already mentioned the fact that we saw Senator Alsobrooks and Senator Gallego join with the Republicans on the Banking Committee yesterday. That was a courageous act on their part. They were under intense pressure, not only from the banks and others who were opposed to that particular markup, but even from Senator Warren herself, who's sitting there, 7 feet away, glaring at them as they said, you know what, we're going to keep working on this. We still have some differences, but we're not going to let those relatively modest differences overwhelm the relatively strong consensus on the majority of issues. So I think it's important that the industry as a whole, and even our critics of the industry, I want to give them some credit too, continue to stay engaged, work to find common ground on the issues that remain outstanding, and not let the pressure up, because we have to get this legislation passed in the next few weeks. This is our moment. It's time that we seize it. And the time for that, I think, is long overdue.
Yeah, Paul, what was it like I don't know if you were in the room yesterday, but I know a lot of folks in the industry were, and there was like some pretty interesting moments, whether it was like, Senator Lummis introducing amendments, and then Senator Warren, I think, had like a pretty interesting kind of soundbite about the process. But then it seemed like there was a pretty critical moment where we thought potentially Senator Warner was going to come across, and I'm going to botched the quote, but it was essentially like, this could get me to a yes. And then he still ended up voting no. Like how far apart, like, so one is, what was the room like? How did you think the energy of the process went? And then two is like, how do we get some of these people that we think we're very close to getting across the finish line, but may have additional concerns about developer protections, as you mentioned, kind of coming into the sort of forefront here as we move forward?
Well, I was in the room. It was something to sit right behind the White House team in the audience. You saw Tyler and Harry and Patrick Witt in the front row, and you could see that even though we were all confident that the committee as a whole would approve the draft legislation, it was unclear whether we get any Democrats to agree with the majority Republicans on any portion of that bill. And so that tension, I think, quickly gave way to, frankly, relief and then joy when we heard Senator Gallego first indicate that he was going to vote in support of the language, even as he continued to have significant concerns about the outstanding issues. And then when we finally heard Senator Alsobrooks confirm her yes vote, I think that was a very dramatic moment as well. I also want to just point out, though, that before we got to the final vote, we had a long series of votes on a number of proposed amendments, many from the Democrats, a number from the Republicans. And even in those votes, we saw a number of other Democrats, again, join with the Republican majority in supporting moving language forward. So I still think there's a very good chance that not only Democrats off the committee, but even other Democrats on the committee, including Senator Warner, who has worked tirelessly on this legislation, but also Senator Warnock, Senator Cortez Masto. We have Democrats engaged with the Republicans. And I think, the expressions of goodwill and good faith that we heard confirm that nobody's done. Nobody's walking away here who wants to see this legislation pass. And so, that gives me hope that we're going to see this thing ultimately cross the finish line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the bipartisan amendments, Paul, and also on Wednesday night, I believe it was reported by me, actually, that the ethics agreement actually in principle, and the reason that there wasn't a sort of a deal, immediately a deal that was clear on Thursday morning, is because some of those negotiations sort of strayed into the BRCA territory. But on ethics, and you heard Gallego on the floor, I think he said, we're 99% of the way there, which is something I never thought I would hear sort of the Democrats come out and say, like, oh, ethics is, pretty much buttoned up. So obviously one to watch, like you said, but, that everybody has been referring to the ethics provisions as the poison pill, but maybe that will not be quite the term to describe it anymore. As we move forward in the next couple of weeks, they may be able to reach a deal, which I think will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I don't know whether the differences that remain are 1% or 10%, but it's significant that you heard the Democrats, in particular Senator Gallego, indicate that there's a lot of common ground that's already been achieved. And I have to say, Ellie, when I was walking the halls of the Senate the day before, it was something to see so many of these committee members huddling with one another, talking in the hallways. Senator Tillis continued to work tirelessly to get Democrats across the line and to make sure that the Republicans who had outstanding concerns were being heard. Chairman Scott ran an excellent process. I have to say, this was my first experience in a live markup with him, where I saw, how skilled he really is at managing a very contentious exercise, but making sure everybody was heard, or at least felt heard, that they were heard. And at the same time, sticking to his knitting and getting the work done that needed to be done in a timely manner. So all of that, I think, gives me a lot of hope that even though reconciliation will be a challenge, and I do think that we still have some issues to close out regarding the BRCA and ethics, we're going to see this happen. I'm very confident of that.
Mm-hmm. Sticking to his knitting. What a great term. I haven't heard that before. One more for you, Paul. So with the, I feel like this bipartisan markup, there's a lot of confidence now in the fact that, this bill is at least moving to the next stage. When it comes to the SEC and what we're seeing from them, we've seen guidance around potential tokenization. There's an innovation exemption that is on the horizon. Coinbase is looking to get more deeply involved in the tokenization space. We haven't seen an exemption come out from them. And do you think that has anything to do perhaps with, were they waiting for some action on the Clarity Act from senators to maybe get this a little bit further along? Do you expect to see more action from the SEC and the agencies in terms of sending out more guidance now that maybe this is more of a sure thing?
Well, it's not for me to speak for Chairman Atkins or Chairman Seelig, but I do think that they have been working to get ready for their moment. And I think they have made clear they see their moment as coming fast on the heels of the legislation actually passing. And so I give the SEC and the CFTC both a lot of credit for lining up all of their ducks in a row and being ready to act as soon as they are in a position to do so. And I think, it's always good government practice for regulators not to get out ahead of a fast moving and active legislative process. So nothing in that surprises me one bit. I think you're going to see rule writing and a rule making process kick into high gear just as soon as the legislation passes. If my experience at the SEC and CFTC is any indication, they're ready to go and they're eager to get started just as soon as the bill passes.
Yeah, Paul, on that note, I want to ask you about sort of the legislative calendar here. You guys have obviously been very active in the space. We're coming up on midterms. It seems like people are starting to, I don't know what the poly market odds are right now, but starting to feel pretty confident about, the House at least flipping. Where do we go knowing that, the timelines are what they are, and then going into midterms? How are you feeling about, things moving forward from here?
Well, I will make a gentle suggestion that you can also consult the odds on the Coinbase prediction market.
Yes, you can. Yes,
thank you.
Yeah.
But look, the calendar is tight. There's no question about it. But we're confident this could be set for a floor vote in early June and ultimately signed by the president before our July 4th holiday here in the States. And so that means all of us are going to have to continue to stay engaged. Even this morning, a group of us at Coinbase were huddling about next steps and how we can continue to provide our support to this process in a productive way. If all that happens, what that will mean is that we will finally have market structure legislation here in the United States before midsummer is over. And that means we can then finally turn to rulemaking and rule writing that will flesh out details that are going to be critically important to bringing things like tokenization to the market and other products that we think the market is ready for.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for your time today. It's good to see you again.
Hey, it's great to see you. Can I say, by the way, as I was walking home from the Hill, feeling elated yesterday, what rolls by me down Pennsylvania, a big bus with all of your faces on it. So I took that as a sign.
I love it. Amazing. Paul, thank you so much for coming on.
Great to see you guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
We're out there.
Actually,
I love that.
Someone else sent me that a photo of us on the bus yesterday. I thought those things came down already.
I think the buses have the best ROI. That's my take. Out of all of the ones out there, that's what we hear about the most.
Us and Morgan just dominating.
Us and Morgan. The fact that we know what that is means it works. So yeah. All right.
Well, to close out the hour, let's bring in Cody Carbone, CEO of the Digital Chamber. Cody, welcome back. How are you feeling?
I feel elated. I am happy. I'm tired. But it's all good vibes. Things were good yesterday. It's good momentum going forward.
Yeah.
All the emotions.
Well, okay, we asked Paul this too. Give us kind of an overview of what it was like in the room, the details, everything. Like, what was the actual vibes like? Obviously, we saw some clips online, but really, what was kind of the takeaway there? Did it feel as optimistic as it felt for those of us not physically there?
I skipped the room. So I was in my office.
Okay. So the question does not stand then.
No, it's historically, I have always found, for me personally, I know other people have different views, but like markups are so chaotic. Hearings as well are so chaotic, and there's so much happening behind the scenes in the back room offices that you can almost be more productive at your desk, watching it, monitoring it, and texting fast and furiously. So I was not there. We had some folks from our team there. I was sitting in our office in DC. I can tell you from as I was texting all of the various staffers that were there and our team there, that it felt chaotic and that it was almost like a roller coaster of emotions throughout the whole markup. Started off going into the markup feeling somewhat defeated. We had gone in after our conversations yesterday morning and the night prior up until midnight with some Senate Democratic offices that we were not going to get the bipartisan vote we wanted. We knew and were confident that we were going to at least have the bill pass the committee because we knew we had the Republican votes. But things started to change very, very quickly. It was right after Ranking Member Warren's opening statement that we started to have more positive text that, okay, like, hey, there could potentially be a deal here, that there could be some agreements on DeFi legislation, that ethics was moving in the right direction. And we knew going into the morning that ethics was going in a positive direction, but it just wasn't there yet for Senator Gallego, who was leading. So it was right after Ranking Member Warren. I don't know if there is a tie here or a nexus, but right after she was done talking that we started to get some texts from Democratic offices like, hey, what do you think about this? Is this possible? Can we get to yes? And started to feel very good. I would have liked to see more than the two Democrats, Senator Alsobrooks and Gallego, vote yes. But I do think that if you look at some of the votes on the amendments where there was a group of 5 that voted yes, that is more illustrative of the positive momentum where we're at and what the positive, what a floor vote could look like. So the vibes from outside were good right after Ranking Member Warren went. Again, not saying there's a connection there, but maybe there's a connection there, but ended up in a really good spot.
Yeah, Cody, I want to ask you specifically about Senator Alsobrooks because she's been such a big collaborator on the stablecoin piece, working with Senator Tillis and his team. And then it seemed like maybe there were some doubts that she would get across the finish line, but obviously their text remained largely intact. And so what do you think were some of the key factors in whether Gallego ultimately come across or Senator Alsobrooks getting across the finish line? And then as constituents, of course, we have to talk about Senator Warner. But what do you think it was like for those individuals kind of getting to the yes in that kind of 11th hour on the markup?
I give them a hell of a ton of credit. It's not easy. I mean, those are 2 freshman senators who decided to not go with an entire block of their party. And that's what we were told even at 10:30 in the morning when the markup started. Is like, hey, our boss from multiple Democratic offices, our boss wants to get to yes, feel really good about the progress, but they don't want to buck the party. They want to make sure that everyone in the party is aligned and that we were expecting them to vote as a block. No. For Senator Alsobrooks to say, hey, I put so much time and effort in Section 404 on the stablecoin yield fight, that I have put so much time and effort in talking to stakeholders on this bill, whether it's industry stakeholders from the crypto side or from the bank side, talking to constituents about the bill. And so hearing her talk in the markup yesterday about what this means for constituents, that she's had personal stories from some people in Maryland who have been defrauded or have had bad experiences with crypto. And that's why she wants this bill to go forward. To me, that was a true profile in courage, because that cannot be easy for a down dais member, a freshman senator, to come out and say, like, I'm going to move forward when I don't know if I have the full support of my party. And I definitely don't have the support of the ranking member. So to see her come out and support, I mean, she has been steadfast in working with us from the time that she was elected. And learning about this industry and having productive meetings. She led on the stablecoin yield fight. And for her to come out and vote yes, it was pretty remarkable. For Senator Gallego, that to me says ethics is in a really good spot. And I mentioned, going into the markup, we heard from the conversations between the White House Crypto Council, between Senator Gallego, Senator Schiff, and then there was this whole ethics meeting that was happening the night before, that there was significant progress made and that everyone felt really good with where they're at. So we were hopeful going in that maybe Gallego would vote yes, but again, a little pessimistic because we heard they were going to vote in the block. Some of the backroom deals that were happening, to me, say that ethics is getting even further and further ahead and closer to a final deal that can be gone on the floor. So Gallego's yes vote to me signals he feels good on ethics. He feels like there's a path forward to yes. If he was going to vote no, to me, that wouldn't say necessarily that there wasn't a path forward. He just didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. To me, this shows ethics can be done very quickly. And I'm hoping that is the great unlock to get not just the 5 that were in committee yesterday voting yes on certain amendments, but up to 12, 15 Democrats When I met with Senator Gallego in Miami at Consensus, he said he wouldn't be surprised if this vote gets 70 votes, which would be a higher vote total than the Genius Act. It means more Democrats are gettable on this. So folks want to vote yes. I think it is a positive markup. I would have liked to see all 5 yesterday, but Gallego and Alsobrooks is pretty awesome, and they should be proud, and the crypto industry should be proud. I mean, because crypto industry obviously is very involved in elections, and for those 2 freshman senators that had the backing of the crypto industry to come out and vote yes, it's pretty telling.
Cody, can you give our audience a sense of what we can expect timeline-wise for getting this bill to the Senate floor? There's obviously reconciliation that has to happen between ag and banking, but what's your sense of timing for that? And then when could we see this bill actually get a vote?
So folks are probably a little hungover today from celebrating. So the work has already started and has never stopped in trying to get this bill to reconcile with ag. Ag committee, banking committee, they're talking and have been talking over the last few weeks. So the timeline I'm looking at, I'm just looking at my calendar right now. So we have another week that they're in session, and then there is a congressional recess. And I imagine that they will be working over the Memorial Day recess, and then you're into June. And so we are really targeting, give them 3 weeks with the recess mixed in. That week of June 8th, I would love to see this bill on the Senate floor. We have heard that date floated around from some staff and from some of the Senate offices that we've worked with. And then hopefully it goes to the House pretty quickly. We're not expecting a ton of hurdles from the House. There might be some noise raised by the Freedom Caucus, who wants some anti-CBDC language, but that's already got a vehicle in the housing bill. So hopefully it's a smoother process than the Genius Act, where the president had to call those 12 Freedom Caucus members to the Oval Office the night before. So if this bill can get a Senate floor vote in, either the 2nd or 3rd week of June, pass the House, possibly the last week of June. I heard Paul just on before. Hopefully this is signed by July 4th. I mean, everything is telling me that is possible. I wouldn't be too pessimistic if it slips. Congress is notorious for missing deadlines. To me, the drop dead date is August recess. It has to get done in July. I know we would all want the theatrics, and all of us want to be at a July 4th signing ceremony. It would be awesome. But to me, the reconciliation process here, that's the toughest battle. If they're able to reconcile these bills, and we have a path to get this on the Senate floor, I think everything else works itself out. They're not going to bring this to the Senate floor until they know they have the votes. They've got 60, and again, hopefully more. But once we see that happen over the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think this moves pretty quickly, and we can get this to the president's desk. So it has to be done by August. Earlier in July is even better, because there is some competing priorities, and I do think it's possible. I think I see the light at the end of the tunnel here.
Great. Cody, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Cody,
hopefully we'll see you July
on.
4th for that signing.
Yeah, we could celebrate hopefully in a month or 2. 2 months.
Fireworks and crypto and hot dogs, everyone's favorite thing.
What's better than that?
Yeah.
Cody, thanks for coming
guys.
on.
Good to see you.
All right, guys. Happy birthday, Gerald.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully
great
that
news.
was the live stream you were hoping for.
Oh, wow.
My God.
Wow. Our team works fast.
Look
Our
at that.
producers have done an amazing job. This is going to be all of us tonight.
That's amazing.
Paul invited too. I love it. And
That is
he
so
and
funny. Cody.
Cody.
There we go.
Love it.
Wow.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks, guys, for
See you next
hanging
week.
out today. Thanks to everyone for listening in. See you next week.